This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, developing world stocks slipped today as relations between the US and China worsened. MSCI's index for emerging market equities tumbled 1.7% on the day, but it was still set to end the week higher after a massive stimulus agreement between EU leaders. South Africa's JSE All Share was down as well as global trade issues weigh on sentiment. The top 40 also fell about 1% today, while industrials were down 1.63% and banks down about 0.87%. Now, also coming up on today's show, we'll be looking at the rise of digital fraud since the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic. The UK and EU give Brexit talks yet another lifeline, ruling out a quick agreement. And a Kenyan startup is helping urban farmers grow produce from their own backyards. Well, we start off the bulletin tonight in Kenya. TransUnion says there's been a surge in digital fraud as consumers and businesses transact on online platforms during the coronavirus pandemic. Suspected fraudulent digital transactions rose about 56% for transactions that originated in Kenya. It adds that businesses need to deploy robust identity verification and fraud detection tools in order to protect themselves and their customers. Now, TransUnion Kenya recently launched new solutions to help businesses fight digital fraud. And let's take this all apart further with Billy Owino. He is the CEO of TransUnion Kenya. Great to have you on the show with us, Mr. Owino. Now, according to your research, digital fraud is rising right along with that sudden need we have to move our banking and purchasing activity to online channels in the wake of COVID-19. So what does your research reveal about how fast this fraudulent activity online is rising and what sectors specifically are facing the greatest risk?
Yeah, thank you, Uche. We've definitely seen a rise in digital fraud, and this is very much in line with the move to digital or digitization, which is really what is going to be the new normal with the pandemic. So if you look at the digital space, and Kenya has been rather ahead in terms of digitization. So when it comes to the digital space, when it comes to especially digital lending, we see that lenders are increasingly seeing a very high rate of fraudulent attempts when somebody is trying to take a loan, and we estimate that this has grown between 25 and 30% over the last quarter.
Now, according to the experts, the growing availability of malware is what's making it easier for even inexperienced criminals to engage in this fraudulent activity. There's, of course, also a rise in COVID-19 schemes, as your research showed. What exactly do you reveal about the most common methods which are being used today, and what do ordinary consumers such as me and, of course, businesses need to watch out for?
Yeah, so there are three phases to this, or aspects to this. One, of course, is the person, because the fraudsters have to get an identity of the person. So synthetic identity fraud is one area where the digital or the fraudsters are really using a lot in the digital space, and this really involves taking a mixture of both true and false information on someone and creating an identity that they can use and try and open up either new accounts or maybe take new loans when you look at the digital lenders. Yeah. The second aspect is, of course, device related, because with the move to digital, of course, the device comes into play. It could be your computer or it could be your smartphone. So you're finding that fraudsters are really trying a lot to use devices and play around with different devices. Some we've even seen having device farms, as we call them, where they have hundreds of devices which they try to use to really defraud customers, but also defraud players in the industry. And then the third piece is related to telcos, because see, in developing markets, and especially in Kenya, we are finding that with mobile money, telco also sit at the heart of it. So they see things like SIM card fraud is really on the rise, and these are the three phases that they really try to use when they're perpetrating fraud.
Now, we did mention earlier, TransUnion is one of the companies now providing solutions to, of course, help fight this. What are some of the tools available to everyday consumers as well as businesses to help, of course, tackle this problem of digital fraud?
Yeah, so at TransUnion, we looked at this, and we are in the business of trust, enabling trust both for the lenders and the customers, or their customers' customers. So when we looked at the different aspects of fraud that's happening in the digital space, then we went ahead and put together launching the market solutions that are aimed at this. The first one is really to do with identity authentication, and what we do here is really tap into different sources of identity that can help provide a 360 degree of a consumer or a customer who appears on a lender's channel. So whilst you might have only one view of that consumer, then we bring in different facets of that consumer to be able to help you understand how they're doing in that space, from the device, from the ID, and also, of course, also how they behave on other platforms. So that single view, 360 view, that can help with the device authentication. The second piece is to do with the velocity check, which is something that fraudsters try to use. So once I've created your false ID, what I'll try to do is really get onto different platforms, open new accounts, take on new facilities as much as possible, and also as quickly as possible. So with the high velocity indicator, we're able to tell you, hey, wait a minute, Billy has been on different platforms today. In the last maybe say 1 hour, he's tried to get money from say about 7 different platforms. So this helps you to determine, you know what, how should I treat Billy when I'm seeing him on my platform? Is he trying to scam somebody? How is the velocity of the attempts that he's trying to make, to really determine whether it's fraudulent, high risk, or whether this is really Billy himself who's trying to take that facility.
Now, the increase of fraudulent activity since the COVID-19 outbreak has become a major problem, not just in Kenya, but globally. What is your take on how authorities are tackling this issue, especially as it pertains to policy as well?
I think there have been great strides in many markets. We know, for example, Europe has been way ahead of this with GDPR, for example. Now we've seen emerging markets also start to put in place different structures to help start tackling cybercrime and, of course, digital fraud. Kenya made the strides towards the end of last year with the Data Privacy Act, for example, in place. The Cyber Criminals or Cybercrime Act that is already being worked on. Now, different countries at different spaces are putting this infrastructure in place. But I think what we've seen that is really key is a very concerted effort that brings in different stakeholders and also put the consumer at the forefront of this. So if you look at the last 2 months, for example, in the financial space, Kenya Bankers Association has been leading a consumer education program or awareness program, which is really meant at educating the consumer on how to take charge of their own identity, of their own safety when they're online. Something as simple as, for example, how you treat your passwords or how you treat your authentication. And we find that when the consumer is put at the heart of it, at the front of it in terms of education, with all the infrastructure and the policy in place, then it becomes more successful because you can have everything else in place, but then the consumer is not aware of what they need to do. So we're glad that that is taking place.
Well, we do have to leave it there. Many thanks, Mr. Owino, for your insights on that topic. That is Billy Owino. He's the CEO at TransUnion Kenya. Well, let's move on now. Let's head to Egypt, where the parliament has approved a new law that will enhance stability and governance in the banking sector. Now, the legislation will give the Central Bank of Egypt more oversight over its financial sector, allowing it to introduce measures governing cryptocurrencies, as well as fintech and electronic payments. CGTN's Adel El Marhoui reports.
Egypt is redefining its governance over the banking sector. The new Banking Act gives the Central Bank of Egypt the right to issue licenses for credit risk guarantee companies, to provide short-term bailout funds for struggling banks, and set its own regulations to govern financial technologies and cryptocurrencies. The North African nation's parliament rejected to give the Administrative Prosecution Authority rights to investigate CBE officials. The House also refused the Egyptian Competition Authority to monitor the banking sector, leaving the CBE as the sole untouched banking regulator in the country.
قانون البنك المركزي بيتحدث على
The law is implementing the constitution articles that maintains the independence of the Central Bank of Egypt. It empowers its governance and stands against fraud and monopoly practices. Overall, the law gives more powers to the CBE. It will have more authority over the banking industry. It will improve many aspects. It could also have some downsides which will emerge after it gets implemented, especially the COVID-19 impact on the economy.
الإدارة ما بين 4 سنوات وبيتجدد له 4 سنوات أخرى.
The new legislation authorizes a 1% tithe on bank profits to finance an industrial development fund. It sets stricter measures to protect clients' privacy and information. Once signed into a law, it will allow the government to introduce new debt instruments beyond bonds and bills. Capital required for foreign exchange companies has been cut in half, while harsher punishment has been imposed for black market violations.
The law deals with numerous banking aspects. We have suffered in the past years and we need to expand our financial inclusion program. We need to develop the banking infrastructure. The law will help in the technological development that we need. If the law is applied properly, it will lead to the development of the banking and financial sectors.
The new banking law gives the Prime Minister the right to appoint the chairman and board members of state-owned banks. They will be subject to competency approval from the Central Bank of Egypt. Despite its ultimate power, the CBE didn't win the entire legislative battle. Parliament has scrapped term limits on board members and managing directors for banks. The House has also enforced a grievances committee to appeal against the CBE's decisions and penalties. Once the act is signed in a law, banks will have up to 3 years to comply with the new regulations. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Meanwhile, Tunisia's government says it is facing a severe economic crisis worsened by the COVID-19 pandemic. The country has now put in place several financial, fiscal and social measures that will be implemented over the next 9 months. Here's CGTN's Adnan Shaushi with the details.
Tunisia's finance minister said that the new measures are necessary in order to mitigate the negative impact of the coronavirus crisis on the country's fragile economy.
These important measures include 8 essential additional chapters relating to boosting investment, improving the business climate, supporting startups and innovative projects, in addition to strengthening the social aspect by supporting low-income groups.
Yaish added that the state will provide the financial, human and logistical needs to implement the set of measures within a period of 6 to 9 months.
These measures also aim to fight poverty, modernize tax administration, digitize procedures, streamline financial transactions in cash, and integrate parallel activities into the economic circuit, in addition to fighting tax evasion, modernizing customs, and strengthening control.
The Parliamentary Finance Commission approved the government's structural reform plan. Experts assert that Tunisia must reduce state expenses and the public sector wage bill in the next 18 months. In particular, there will be no recruitment in the civil service in 2020 and 2021.
The economic situation is very difficult. It's unprecedented. The government is looking for additional resources to finance the state budget until the end of the current year. In the meantime, it's unacceptable to pay the salaries of over 800,000 civil servants while the economy is at its lowest level.
The Ministry of Finance has created the Tunisian Fund of Funds and boosted it with around 600 million dinars, which is more than $200 million, to finance startups. Authorities will also boost public-private partnership and regional development projects.
Tunisian Prime Minister Les El-Fakhfakh announced that the new economic and social measures aim to increase growth and create wealth and investment by encouraging entrepreneurs in the private sector and improving the business climate. The state will also support strategic sectors, especially tourism and agriculture. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Well, let's now take a look at our corporate headlines today. The sale of a 20% equity stake in MTN Uganda will be restricted to citizens of the East African Community Trading Bloc. Now, the government is forcing all its telecom operators, including MTN Uganda and the local unit of India's Bharti Airtel, to list a fifth of their shares on the local bourse in order to allow locals to benefit from the sector's profits. And South African department store chain Woolworths has flagged a small fall in annual sales. That is after its non-food stores were shut in the second half of its financial year due to the COVID-19 lockdowns. Now, Woolworths, which also operates in Australia, says group sales for the 52 weeks ending in June fell 0.1%. The sales performance for the second half was also hit by a drop in customer numbers, with some opting to shop online. Meanwhile, U.S. investment bank Goldman Sachs has reached a $3.9 billion settlement with the Malaysian government over the multi-billion-dollar One Malaysia Development Berhad scandal. Now, back in December 2018, Malaysian prosecutors filed charges against 3 Goldman Sachs units for misleading investors over bond sales, which totaled $6.5 billion. Goldman Sachs has consistently denied any wrongdoing. And Europe's Airbus is amending French and Spanish government loans in a final bid to reverse U.S. tariffs. It hopes to jog the United States into settling a 16-year-old dispute over billions of dollars of aircraft subsidies. Now, Airbus has agreed to pay higher interest rates on 2 loans it received to help develop its A350 jet. And that is a look at our corporate headlines. Well, do stay with us. We'll be heading into a short break now.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra Naidu. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back. Well, let's head to South Africa, where consumers are cheering the Reserve Bank's decision to cut rates further. The bank has lowered the repo rate by 25 basis points, taking it to a 4-decade record low of 3.5%. The prime commercial lending rate is now 7%. Here's CGTN's Sumitra Naidu with more.
The Reserve Bank cut rates again this week, the 4th time this year, bringing the prime lending rate down to 7%. It's good news for South Africans, especially those paying off their debt.
We've seen over 90% of individuals in the South African economy, due to a recent survey, indicate that they are very worried about making their debt servicing costs. Of course, with inflation very well contained, that is probably not the reason why the Reserve Bank moved interest rates, given the crisis that we're in from a COVID-19 perspective.
The central bank has made aggressive moves this year, pushing outside of its comfort zone. The bank usually takes a cautious approach, but with inflation down to just 2% and the economy expected to contract by over 7% this year, the rate cuts are warranted.
Even as the lockdown is relaxed in coming months, for the year as a whole, investment, exports and imports are expected to decline sharply. Job losses are also expected to rise further.
The latest interest rate cut will provide further relief for those in heavy debt and those wanting to invest in property. But for the majority of South Africans, many of whom have lost their jobs, it's little comfort.
You have to look at this cut in the context of the 300 basis points or 3 percentage points that we have already received since the start of the year. The current economic crisis is unprecedented. We are seeing consumer incomes being under a lot of pressure. We are seeing job losses being very high, and those with debts are really struggling under the burden of very tough economic conditions. So the cut will ameliorate some of that pressure. Monthly repayments will be a bit lower.
South Africans are using savings and social payments to survive, but all these sources of income are being eroded as the lockdown continues. Without a rapid opening up of the economy, many are sinking into deep financial hardship.
Many corporates have been hanging on using savings, and households as well, but savings are going to start to wear out, and we're going to see a real financial predicament starting to rear its head in the second half of this year.
The Reserve Bank is likely to go back to being more cautious as it watches the local currency. It's also keeping close tabs on the conflict between the US and China. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
And elsewhere in South Africa, a new drone manufacturing facility is set to open in Cape Town. It will construct the country's first locally designed, fully waterproof multi-role drone. Here's CGTN's Travis Andrews with the details.
It's called the Gannet Pro, and like many drones, it's capable of many useful aerial applications. But unlike many others, this one is fully amphibious. It's capable of going where no other can, including through waterfalls and even under the sea, which has made it a particularly useful tool for recreational fishing, search and rescue, the medical industry, and even life-saving. What makes this one unique is that it's designed from the ground up with water in mind.
We found a way to make these drones waterproof. We've patented that in multiple countries. We've rolled it out, and this is the first look at our drone. Like almost a year later, we've got our final production copy in front of us. This is all injection molded and really next level. We've got dealers signed up all over the world.
The manufacturer will develop 2 models, with one being built at a facility in China and one set to be built at a new facility being set up in Cape Town. Their employers will work in constructing the machine's unique features, which according to the company includes the world's first patented dual payload release system. Also on board is a unique flight bladder with zero permeability and a 2-kilogram payload capability that will make fishing a lot more interesting. Orders have come in from all over the world, and that sets a foundation for the manufacturing facility, which will be built here in the Waverley Business District and initially employ more than 20 people.
It really is a refined product. It is expensive to make. It is complicated to make. We have decided that we actually want our own version of this that we are going to build here in South Africa. We want to bring an affordable drone to the market, something that's under the 10,000 Rand mark, and we are going to be shipping these in shells and parts, having local jobs, building as many of these drones as we can.
For now though, this eye in the sky will soon take to the skies across the world, and it could be just the start of many more locally made drones on the horizon. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
And let's head to Libya now, where fighting has stopped, at least for now. But long power blackouts in the country caused by years of poor maintenance still cause misery in the scorching summer weather. Now, the power cuts have since led to protests, with armed men storming electricity facilities to demand that engineers bring back power.
Many areas in Libya have endured total blackouts, and many Libyans are angry. They have been carrying out protests, with demonstrators repeatedly attacking electricity workers.
They have left us in a miserable state. There is no water and no light. There are people who are sick and rely on ventilators to breathe. If you cut the electricity, then you cut their ventilators. You say there is no money coming in from the central bank, but where are all the billions taken for the sake of maintaining the stations?
The power cuts have also crippled farming in the west of Tripoli.
When the power cuts in Tripoli last for a long time, we do not work. We might leave behind half the crop. If we normally plant 2 or 3 or 4 hectares, with the power cuts we can only plant half an acre.
State power company GCOL says it is trying to manage the blackouts by sharing power supply among different towns in western Libya.
The electricity problem is shown in the fact that there isn't enough supply to meet the increasing demand on the grid. There's also a lack of guidance on electricity usage and a lack of solutions to help solve many of the problems faced by the workers.
Libya once had a strong electricity network, but years of chaos and fighting is said to have wrecked infrastructure and hurt the country's power generation. Chamhono, CGTN.
Well, you are watching Global Business Africa. We're going to take a short break now. Still to come. The UK and the EU give Brexit talks yet another lifeline, ruling out a quick agreement. And Germany introduces stricter safety measures to boost confidence in the aviation sector.
Holding gun machine guns from police forces toward the protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time?
Not at all.
Thank you very much for your time. What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what do you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories, are these stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Accra is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in. Business in Africa is After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN. Let's head to Nigeria now. The country's central bank plans to establish a 38 billion infrastructure development company. That is part of Nigeria's efforts to aimed at spending its way out of an impending recession and, of course, bridging an infrastructure gap. As CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam reports, the plan will receive funding from domestic and international financiers.
For the approval to establish a CBN-led infrastructure development company, which would leverage local and international funds for rebuilding of critical infrastructure across the country. The sum of 15 trillion naira is projected over 5 years for the initial run.
Nigeria's central bank governor, Godwin Emefiele, announcing the Apex Bank's development financing plan on the sidelines of the Monetary Policy Committee meeting. The $38 billion fund will be spread over a 5-year period. It's part of President Muhammadu Buhari's administration's policy thrust towards infrastructure development and economic advancement. And it's coming at a time the country has been hit by an economic downturn, largely attributed to the decline in oil prices and shocks from the COVID-19 pandemic.
This entity, which will be wholly focused on Nigeria and Nigerians alone, will be co-owned by the CBN, the African Finance Corporation, and the Nigerian Sovereign Wealth Investment Authority, but exclusively managed by an independent infrastructure fund manager that will mobilize local and foreign capital.
Development economist Sam Amadi is confident that it will accelerate economic recovery.
Of course, job creation, infrastructure means a lot of jobs will involve, and those jobs will help to reduce the unemployment rates, which is close to about 33-35% now in terms of predictions that could happen post-COVID. So with this infrastructure work, especially if they are low-tech and focusing on low-skill and a lot of low-skill labor, then we'll see both the poverty rate go down and the unemployment.
Nigeria's huge infrastructure deficit has remained a topical issue as it has undermined the country's economic potential. Among other challenges, the West African nation faces poor transport networks, epileptic power supply, and huge housing deficit. The government says it would require an estimated $93.3 billion annually over the next 30 years to bridge the infrastructure gap. For now, the $38 billion investment may be just a fraction of what's required, but it's seen as a step in the right direction. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Well, let's turn our attention to some international news. Britain and the European Union have ended their latest round of post-Brexit talks by ruling out a quick deal. But the two sides also voiced hope for an agreement in the coming months. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson had promised to add a bit of oomph to the stalled talks when he joined them last month. His main goal then was to get a framework settled by the end of July. That was in an effort to reassure British businesses they wouldn't have to start preparing for a messy no-deal breakup at the end of this year. But the chief negotiator said that a July settlement was unlikely because of a fundamental gap in major areas such as fishing rights and fair competition rules. Now, the European Parliament has finished its first debate of a historic recovery and a budget deal which was reached by EU leaders. Deputies are now pushing back against cuts in spending which involve health and climate.
From the opening salvo, a few things were clear.
I'm happy about the agreement, no doubt about that, but I'm not happy about the deal.
MEPs want revisions to the $2 trillion coronavirus recovery fund and long-term budget package EU leaders agreed to earlier in the week. It was also unmistakable which parts they want changed.
At a time when the world is very concerned about a second wave of infection, European leaders have decided to drastically cut programs for research and public health. How can we accept that?
Not a single euro to a country that does not uphold the rule of law.
We also need clear commitment for our own resources. It simply wouldn't be serious to take up such a loan without knowing how we're going to pay it back.
At an extraordinary session, MEPs outlined what it will take to get their consent on the historic deal. They're willing to live with fewer grants in the recovery fund, but they're not willing to accept the long-term budget as is. MEPs want the drastic cuts in proposed funding for health, climate, and research initiatives reinstated, questioning how Europe can stick to its goals of building resilience and climate neutrality with scaled-back funding. European President Ursula von der Leyen, who was on hand to drum up support for the deal, called the cuts regrettable.
And we should always remember that the value of EU programs far outweigh their costs. Yes, we managed to avoid even further cuts, as some member states wanted. But this MFF is a difficult pill to swallow.
Von der Leyen also said the Commission will put forward a new package of taxes to help pay for the $860 billion recovery fund. It will include a digital levy, a carbon border tax, and an extension to the current emissions trading system. As for linking funds to the rule of law, von der Leyen didn't defend the current agreement, but vowed to push ahead with a meatier 2018 proposal on the subject.
And staying in Europe, passengers arriving at German airports from areas deemed to be high risk for COVID-19 could face mandatory testing going forward. Now, the measure was approved by German federal ministers as part of safety measures in order to boost confidence in its aviation sector. The measure comes as industry chiefs meet in Berlin for an aviation summit, with the troubled sector facing ongoing uncertainty. Here's Lucy Hoff reporting from Frankfurt.
German authorities are looking to strike a balance between protecting the health and safety of travellers whilst also boosting consumer confidence, with the aviation industry on its knees in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. The International Air Transport Association predicts a loss of $332 billion worldwide for the industry this year and warns this is just the beginning. These new plans, due to be signed off by the German federal government on Friday, would see mandatory tests at all German airports for anyone coming in from high-risk countries. For now, that applies to pretty much everywhere except European countries like France and Spain as the Schengen zone reopens. What we're seeing is the gradual resumption of short-haul travel within Europe, but slow progress when it comes to those crucial long-haul routes, particularly the US and China, which are hugely profitable for airlines like Lufthansa in Europe. Here's the chairman of the UFO union here in Germany, Daniel Flohr.
This is where we're looking now. What is happening to the markets on the long haul flights, on the international flights, because this is where companies like Lufthansa make their money from, same as Air France or KLM. And then there's the Asian region, where we don't know how it is going to develop in China, and restrictions for foreigners in China are very, very strict.
Meanwhile, in more bad news, the Irish airline Ryanair has announced its plans to close its Frankfurt-Hahn base after German pilots voted against pay cuts. The airline plans to axe 3,000 jobs to deal with the COVID-19 fallout and the subsequent collapse in demand. Frankfurt is one of several hubs for the company that could be shut down later this year as Ryanair looks to reduce costs. Lucy Hoff, CGTN, Frankfurt.
Now, a lot of people dream of being able to imitate their favorite TV stars. Well, in China, thousands are doing just that. One of the country's most popular variety shows, Street Dance of China, debuted its latest season on video platforms over the weekend, boosting demand for dance classes and, of course, the products the fans love to buy. Well, Chen Tong takes a closer look.
One of the favorite streets for Shanghai's dancers is East Nanjing Road, where the Shimao Group has opened a pop-up store to sell derivative products from the dance competition show, Street Dance of China. The t-shirts and towels sold out over the weekend, and the chic installations were attracting plenty of fans to stop and take pictures.
I watched all 3 seasons of Street Dance of China. All of us in the fan group have come by.
Street Dance of China first debuted 2 years ago and was full of pop stars. The latest season's premiere show had an advance booking of 1.5 million viewers and has also attracted more than 20 brands to work with the program to launch more than 240 derivative products for the fans. The popular show is helping Shanghai Shimao to find young consumers.
The
fan base of the variety show matches our consumer base. We have chic brands including Nike and Champion in the shopping mall, and the major consumers of these brands like hip-hop culture. Since the street culture is now welcomed by major audiences in China, the pop-up store will help us find more young consumers.
The screening of the street dance shows have attracted many young Chinese, and that have also driven up the demand for street dance classes. In China, there are more than 5,000 street dance schools with more than 300,000 teachers. While some fans are content to just shop, many want to learn to street dance themselves. Caster Studio, one of the largest in Shanghai, offers instruction in a range of the most popular street dance styles: locking, breaking, and popping. A lot of the students are fans of the shows.
I always wanted to attend a street dance competition, but I never dared. But after I watched the show, I decided to learn, and I'm keeping it up.
I used to think street dance was just people rolling around on the ground, but since I watched the show, I learned there are many different kinds of dance.
With all this popularity, it's not surprising that the Caster Studio is busy expanding its business. The studio was founded in Shanghai in 2005, but now has 12 schools nationwide, catering to 200,000 students a year. The students range in age from primary school students to even the retired. Zofi, a teacher at the Caster Studio and a street dancer himself, says the television programs are bringing out more and more people who want to learn to dance.
The top stars have attracted more audiences to street dancing. The dancers are very attractive, and that helps bring out more potential dance lovers. Some viewers may never have seen a street dance at all, but they fell in love with it because of one show.
And with Street Dance of China being such a popular show, what could be more natural than the emergence of some competition? The Greatest Dancer, which now airs on Dragon TV. Who knows how many more potential street dancers are now being groomed in front of their television screens. Chen Tong, ICS for CGTN, Shanghai.
Well, let's shift focus now and take a look at Africa's commodity markets today. Gold was headed for its biggest weekly gain in more than 3 months. It traded above $1,900 per ounce for the first time since 2011. Now, prices did benefit from a weaker dollar and inflation expectations, which have been fueled by stimulus for battered economies globally. Meanwhile, gold tends to benefit from widespread stimulus measures from central banks as it is perceived as a hedge against inflation. And oil prices were flat today as support from a weaker dollar was offset by tensions between the US and China. Well, let's take a quick break now, still coming up on the show. A Kenyan startup is helping urban farmers grow produce from their own backyards. And we take coffee lovers for some bean to brew lessons in Mexico.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN. See the difference.
Now, in Nigeria, many artists have been exploring less conventional mediums and shifting away from traditional ones such as oil paints and charcoal. Well, CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam brings us the story of one artist who uses fire to produce his hyper-realist work.
A special kind of art known as pyrography. It starts out unclear to an ordinary onlooker what Imabasi Fineworld has planned out as he fires up his gas torch, burning the traced outline on his wood board. Then carve after carve and scrape after scrape, the 48-year-old finally displays an interplay of light and shadow, bringing his artistic vision to life.
I'm into all kinds of arts. I'm into creative arts, but I like doing pyrography because I like monochrome work. It's like the African thing. It's not like painting that one need to use paints, oil colors and all that. You use brush.
Imabasi has groomed his innate gift into a professional career. His works are sought after in some African countries like Ghana, Kenya and Cote d'Ivoire. His art pieces sell between $400 and $3,500. But in a low-income nation like Nigeria, getting customers is oftentimes an uphill task.
Art is appreciated everywhere in the world, but the power to purchase, the purchasing power is actually the issue in Nigeria. Because of the economic situation in Nigeria, there's no purchasing power.
Nigerian artists have gained traction in the international market. In 2018 alone, art pieces by Nigerians sold for up to $3.3 million at auctions in London and New York. Imabasi is hoping to one day expand his frontiers to such platforms as well as open his own gallery. Kelechi Mekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Now, an increasing number of Kenyans living in the heart of Nairobi are growing herbs from their balconies and setting up organic gardens from their homes. One small Kenyan startup is tapping into that market now by creating a soil composite that is then sold to urban farmers. Chao Mgono has the story.
Sprout Organic has revolutionized agriculture in Kenya by creating an alternative mix for urban farmers practicing in small spaces. The composite is made by mixing animal bone meal, seeds, foliage, dry leaves, twigs and kitchen waste like banana peels. To top off the mixture, worms are added to aid in the maturing process that takes up to 4 weeks. The end result is a product that resembles black cotton soil. Following the outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic, the company has seen a 10% surge in demand.
So these are the red regulars, yeah? So basically we take like everything that we get from our kitchen, or if you have a farm, any post-harvest waste, carrot peels, banana peels, tomatoes, as long as it's not acidic. So as you can see, it's really light and fluffy. It's more like, it looks like black cotton soil, but it's really not. It's purely organic matter that has been decomposed by the worms. We've tried and tested on a number of our clients' farms, and the result has been extraordinary. The feedback has been good, with some saying up to 96% germination rate with the seed mix that we've been able to come up with.
A 20-kilogram bag retails at $33. With the recent rise in coronavirus cases, many are opting to grow their own produce.
Now more than ever, people are seeing the need to grow their own produce because in the beginning, people weren't allowed to leave the houses to do the shopping. So you'd find most families would, it would be a bother for most families to go outside to do their grocery shopping. So people started realizing that they can make better use of their spaces to grow their own produce. Even if it's just a few veggies like skuma, spinach, and also like the regular herbs that you can use as a garnish or dressing on your salads or food.
From where we started, we have seen tremendous growth in people taking interest in planting in the balconies or in their backyards. So as a result of this, we have created systems that will aid them in this endeavor. So anybody can actually be an urban farmer.
Economic growth has deteriorated sharply, with many job losses in different sectors. Many farmers used to make a living by renting out tiny tin shacks, but the coronavirus pandemic means tenants can no longer pay for rentals.
These one rooms, rental houses, then I change them into goat, dairy goat keeping. So you can see 1, 2, 3. These are 4 rooms. These are 4 rooms. We have around 40 dairy goats. And they are giving good money rather than renting. You are getting good money out of this.
Sprout owners say that although their technology is not new, they hope to expand production beyond Nairobi to cover other towns and boost sales. Chao Muhono, CGTN.
Well, how important is coffee to you? And furthermore, how much do we know about the industry behind the humble coffee bean? Well, CGTN's Alastair Baverstock caught up with one collective that is trying to help coffee producers control their supply chain. Take a look.
When it comes to global economics, a general rule is that the greater the demand for a product, the more money it can be sold for. But not when it comes to coffee. Since 2012, the coffee market worldwide has grown by more than 50%, generating some $430 billion in yearly revenue today. Yet producers say they're not getting paid any more for their crop. It's a problem Mexican economist and entrepreneur Alberto Rezabal has puzzled over.
In a traditional coffee supply chain, there are an average of 8 or 9 middlemen between the farmer and the final consumer, and the farmer gets less than 1% of the total value of the cup of coffee that is sold. So the most important thing was that we had to stop selling raw coffee beans.
Alberto went to Chiapas state, where Mexico meets Guatemala, and founded a region-wide coffee cooperative which sees producers like Jose Andres control their supply chain, harvesting, roasting, transporting and turning it into espresso in their own Mexico City coffee shop.
When I was young and worked with my father, our coffee plantations were very small and we didn't have much production. But my father was the first producer from our community to join the cooperative, and it brought many benefits. So we decided to dedicate ourselves to it full time.
The company is called Yomol Atel, Setzal Mayan for Together We Work, Together We Dream, and today provides work and a better income for more than 100 families. And this is where the Celtal Mayan coffee ends up, 900 kilometers from Chiapas in the Mexican capital. Here there is a clear market willing to pay top prices for premium coffee, and the steady growth has allowed the collective to expand, opening several more coffee shops in and around the capital. But in addition to their own shops, the collective seeks relationships with similar-minded clients in the hope of spreading their own business philosophy beyond Mexico's borders.
We are starting to work with a distributor in the United States. The strategy we are using is finding clients who understand the project we are building, who know all of the work that goes into a cup of coffee, and that more than an economic transaction, that we generate human relationships through our activities.
A cup of coffee that symbolizes a fairer world. Alistair Baverstock for CGTN, Chilon, Mexico.
And before we go, a quick look at Africa's currencies. Kenya's shilling did regain some ground today. That was due to receding dollar demand from the energy sector, which of course had pushed the shilling to an all-time record low during previous sessions. South Africa's rand weakened also after the central bank cut interest rates on a Thursday and of course signaled it may have reached the end of its easing cycle. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.